Hello and welcome to this event, Cultural Diversity in the Law, as part of Victorian Law Week. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples and traditional owners and custodians of the land and waterways upon which our lives depend. I acknowledge and pay my respects to ancestors of this country, elders, knowledge holders and leaders past and present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. My name is Randa and I'm one of the court's self-represented litigants case managers. Prior to that, I was an associate to Judges Birchall and Tran, then Judicial Registrars Birchall and Tran. If you have any questions for the panellists today, you can type any questions into the Q&A box at any point in time during the event. I will relay these questions to our panel later on. I'd like to introduce you to our panellists. On the far right, we have His Honour Judge Pillay. We have Cami Morgeni, we have Rabia Burke, we have Achol Butch, and we have Werner Dietrich. And also we have Eve and Kirk, who are our Auslan interpreters. If you'd like to see them, please change your view to gallery. And I'll just kick off some questions now for our panel. Again, I'd remind you, if you have any questions throughout, please type them into the Q&A box at any time during the event. Also, a small reminder, please note that our panel could not give any legal advice or comment on specific issues. Your Honour, if I may direct the first question to you, what are the major changes that you've seen during your career or lifetime in relation to cultural diversity in the law? How would you compare the court today to when you first started in the law or at the court? And what is a positive change that you have seen since you started at the court?
I'm just going to take the first part. I think the biggest challenge that I've experienced over my time in the law has really been the recognition of how corrosive, how much disrespect comes to the court and the justice system when we do not have a judiciary or a judicial system that represents the community that it serves. I think the recognition of the corrosive force of having only a select group of people in positions of power has been something that the community has discovered much more in recent times. I'm not sure if Rabia's got a view on that. I know she's been in the law less time than I have, but certainly a few years.
Thank you, Judge. I would say, again, I'll preface this by saying that my time in the law is relatively short, but I have worked at the court for some time. In my time at the court, the biggest change for me has been the increasing numbers of those of us who work here who are culturally and linguistically diverse. Over time, it has increased in the number of associates I see, or the number of people working in registry, or throughout our whole court building. I know when I came to the court, this is something that I would talk about all the time, about not seeing representation in our judges, or seeing people I could talk to about being culturally diverse. And over that time, I have found that has changed. And we're definitely in the transition of change, and we're seeing not only a change in our judicial appointments, but those of us who work for the judges, those of us who help support the court system, and broadly within our profession as well. So I would say we are in a time of change, and we have more, we're starting to have the conversation around cultural diversity. We're talking about what we need to do and what steps and actions we need to take to have a facilitation of culture change.
Cami, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, I've been in the profession for a lot less time than Rabia and Judge Pillay. However, one thing that I have noticed is that having more judges who have diverse backgrounds is extremely inspiring for young lawyers who have diverse backgrounds, because not only do we see people who look like us succeeding in the profession, but they're going to the very top level of the profession. And that is extremely inspiring and gives you a lot of hope that you will thrive extremely well in this career.
Achol or Werner, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I think if Judge and Rabia are going to say their time within the law has been short, then mine's pretty much non-existent, because I've been in the court for like 6 months and started law for like 4 years ago. But I think the biggest change is having a judiciary who hires people who look like me. Like maybe like 3-5 years ago, being an associate was like a dream of mine and I never thought it would be possible. So having like judge just kind of go out and be like, I'm gonna hire associates who are diverse, is a very big impact. And I think I saw that when we were on circuit earlier this year, and my co-associate and I were just looking at the bench, and she mentioned to me that just seeing herself, who my co-associate is of a Cantonese background, me and Judge on the bench, that really meant a lot and sent a very powerful message that the court system is opening up to a more diverse world and is actually slowly becoming a representative of the community that it serves. So I think that's very important, having judges who are going out there and hiring associates who are not the typical looking associates that were here 10 years ago. So yeah.
Werner?
Okay.
So I might just, are there major changes that you've seen during your career or lifetime regarding cultural diversity? And can I, before you answer that question, can I please apologise? I didn't introduce Cami, Rabia and Achol as associates at the County Court, and I didn't give some context who Werner is. Werner took part in the County Court's Indigenous Clerkship program, which is run by the Victorian Bar. So I apologise for not making that clear at the outset. So sorry.
That's all good. I'll forgive you.
Before you speak so that people understand.
Yes, it's good to see the change of the different cultures coming through. But when I was doing the week in clerkship through the Big Bar, because I'm representing the First Nations, I didn't really see that many First Aboriginal people come through yet. It was disappointing because, yeah, the challenges we still face to come through, it's still happening today in 2022. And I believe that should be more structure should be done in the proceedings of the courts of all different levels. Yeah.
I think my experiences in the court have been quite similar to the associates and Judge and Werner's, and I think, you know, there's a lot of work that is being done, but I think we can all agree that there's still a lot more work to be done, and we're all working really hard to make some differences, you know, within the court, and I'm sure some of us externally in other ways. Werner, can I please direct this next question to you? Can you briefly explain what the Indigenous Clerkship is and your experience as a participant in that program?
It gave us a step inside when we were studying law to get an insight how the law proceeds in the process, the insights of the criminal justice works. Because when you're doing at the university studying law, it's good to be told how things work, but when you actually get accepted to go through the Big Bar and the clerkship, it gives you a broad, more aspect of how everything works. The judges, the associates, the lawyers, the barristers, and you can connect to them, talk to them, ask them questions. It was good, yeah, really good.
Have you got some examples of some of the things that you did during your clerkship?
Yes, there was a couple of murder cases, bail applications, stuff like that was pretty intense. That's something it was full on, just actually being in the court and knowing that someone's done something. Exceptionaire, it's but meeting the judges and like getting a free lunch was pretty good too. I definitely enjoyed that. But the connection we had with the judges was really great. They help us, they support us. They were just fantastic. I couldn't fault any of them, and yeah, it was great.
So you were able to practically apply and see how
We
the
can.
law applies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the criminal side of things, you see how it all applies together when you're actually there. Yeah, you can see how in interpretation of the law, the arguments on both sides with the jury and
And access to the actual profession, I think, is what I'm hearing you're saying is really critical to give you that networking opportunity
Oh,
to connect with judges and, you know,
Yeah.
perhaps you've got some friendships or some mentors
certainly
from
have.
that moving forward.
Yes, heaps, it was good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can identify with that experience because my first experience with the county court was doing an internship through the Diverse Women's Mentoring Association with the then judicial registrars, Birchall and Tran, who are now judges, Birchall and Tran. And through that, you know, it opened a door for me that, you know, as a sort of a first in family to go to law school and as a mature age student with a family, we didn't quite have a lot of time to undertake the more extended internships and clerkships. And it was really great to have, you know, diverse women, you know, opening the door for other diverse women and creating opportunities that otherwise would not have existed for someone like myself. So, and, you know, here we are. And hopefully you'll be, you know, there'll be something like that waiting for you too, but you can't put, I think, you know, a price on how important that is to someone and what that does for paying it forward and opening the door for other people after you.
Randa, just picking up on what Mona said there about the Indigenous clerkship program, one of the things that I learnt when the county court decided to involve itself in that program, it's a wonderful program which the bar runs. And I was very naive in just thinking it's a good program because it allows exposure for young Indigenous people, including you in that, Lorna, young Indigenous people in the court system. Because I know we're the same age. But what I didn't realise, and this is the important thing about it, it's a learning opportunity both ways. It really is. There's so much for us to learn as an institution. And one of the things that many Indigenous people said to me about the program was, we don't see the court system the same way that you do. We see it as part of a system which used to dispossess us, keep us at arm's length, and often deal with us only as criminals or people who came here with history. So it's not a friendly place for us. So you might say, come here and have this great clerkship and you'll meet judges and you'll even get a free lunch occasionally. But it's more than just that opportunity. It is the fact that we now are seen on both sides. We can participate in this institution as much as we can be judged by it. We can also be participants in it. And for me, that, you know, I'm still young, but I just have not grappled with that enough. And perhaps that's the learning we as a court can take from that program as well. Because I learned so much when Lorna was here, or even when Miani was here. It was incredible. That's why programs work for everyone. Programs like this work for everyone, the entirety of the community. Fosters respect. And that's critical, I think.
Oh, I agree. If I could touch on that point in my role, Judge, as a self-represented litigants case manager, we have a lot of people who, you know, various ages of various cultural, you know, and other diverse backgrounds, you know, non-English speaking, and often, you know, for myself, you know, when they see me, they know I'm different, you know, and they just, they say things to you and they're comfortable speaking to you and dealing with you because they know you're of a diverse cultural background, that you potentially speak a language other than English and that you might actually understand them. And so what you're saying, you're right in that it fosters respect and it makes us more accessible to those who may have felt like the other in the past.
And I know it's one of the things that I've recently been thinking about again, because, you know, we as a court deal with lots of criminal activities such as gang violence or young people getting into trouble. And one of the things you try to understand is, why is this happening in our community? Not just enough to say, well, look, here's a sentence to someone and they'll go away or they'll be on a diversion program or whatever it is. That's not enough. We need, and we always try to understand what brings that person here. And we only start to understand that if we're willing to ask ourselves that question, what brings this person here? Because if we can do something to change that, then we have a real opportunity to build a stronger community. And that's really what important public institutions like this are about, building stronger communities.
If I could maybe direct the next question to one of the associates. In terms of those from ethnic, religious or linguistic minority groups who are involved in court cases, and that feeds nicely into what we've just been talking about, Judge. Have you seen any changes over time as to what it's like court users who access the court system?
I'm again very non-existent experience within the court system. So I don't think I'm fully equipped to talk about it to a certain extent. I think the only example I can really give was when I was fortunate enough to go to the High Court in 2019 to assist in a case run by some amazing criminal barristers. And we were defending a South Sudanese woman, and that hit really close to home because I am South Sudanese. And I was able to bring my mum, and I think seeing her interaction with the High Court in particular and my interaction with the court and the difference in between that was very shocking to me, because even before we even got into security within the High Court, I could see that my mom was panicking and she didn't want to enter the court system. And that's because of her experience with authority and power and how she perceived the legal institution. Whereas I could freely just walk in and just go through security and go and sit in my seat and everything.
Without giving it a second thought.
Without giving it a second thought. And I think that really reminded me that not everyone in our community is as comfortable to enter a courtroom as someone who, compared to someone who is studying law and who has had family members who have kind of just backed her up and be like, you can do whatever you want to do. Don't let anyone tell you different because of your race or your gender. So I think in seeing that just reminded me that there is change that needs to be done. And I think change starts from the very bottom, even before you enter the courtroom, with the security staff that you have to go through. And some of these changes could include maybe education on like unconscious bias, education on the anxiety that someone from a diverse background might feel, just even being like seeing a court and having to go through it, and making them feel welcome from the very outset, not just when they enter the courtroom and deal with the associates or like the judge themselves. So I think that's very important. Do you have anything to say, Rabia?
I would say, I won't give an example of my time at the court, but in my previous role, I worked in a law firm where I would often interact directly with clients. And I found that I wasn't born here, I speak two other languages. And if I could converse with a client or a prospective client in Punjabi or in Hindi, and they could tell me what had happened to them, I found that they'd be much more comfortable talking to me. Whereas if they'd speak to one of my colleagues who they'd have to try and either, use an interpreter or try and just fumble through, I found I got more from them. And I also found they were more comfortable speaking to me. And they probably felt a little bit more of a connection to me, because I would say to them, oh, look, my parents are migrants. I was 7 when I came here, so I'm just like you, don't worry. So I guess for me, I would take that in for law firms or organisations. It's such an asset to have people who are culturally diverse, linguistically diverse, because it really can foster not only things for your business in terms of your, what you're trying to achieve for your clients, but also imagine in your workplace, you will have other people who will relate to that or might find that interesting and want to learn more about them. And that's how we slowly start to foster those cultural changes.
I will give an example in the court. So I work in crime, and there tends to be a lot of people of diverse backgrounds who access the criminal system. I think since my time starting at the court, I've witnessed a lot of judges become a lot more aware of the need to have a lot more sensitivity surrounding interpreters. And I think that when I was in law school, I volunteered at CLCs, and I think the approach that a lot of lawyers take towards interpreters is very standoffish and more of like, you're just here to translate things, and not a lot of sensitivity surrounding the fact that someone speaking a second language is accessing the legal system. But I think since my time starting here, I've seen judges become a lot more conscious and aware of the difficulty and anxiety surrounding a accused person accessing the criminal system and the requirement for an interpreter and a bit more, I guess, patience dealing with clients or offenders who have that background.
Thank you. Yeah, and also, you know, taking into account that it can, you know, potentially double the time that it takes to complete a hearing or, you know, a trial, but it's really critical for access to justice that we're aware of the need for that to happen and take place and to have that patience and tolerance. Could I just remind everybody watching today and that's here with us today, please, that you're welcome at any point in time to send through some questions through the question and answer box. We're almost at the point where if you do have any questions, we're going to open up the floor to you for those questions. While we're doing that, could I perhaps ask the panel about some of the work that we're doing in the county court around cultural inclusivity and diversity. And before I do that, I'd just like to say that Her Honour Judge Tran was going to be joining us today. Unfortunately, she's been struck with the dreaded corona, and she's unable to make it today. But she is co-chair of the court's Diversity and Inclusion Committee with His Honour Judge Pillay. And if I could ask you, Judge Pillay, just to explain a little bit about what this committee is and does at the moment.
The committee was formed late last year. The Chief Judge firmly believed that we needed a diversity committee. And part of its remit is to address that fundamental problem that I think I touched on at the beginning, which is that if we have a judicial officers and a judicial system which is drawn from only one segment of the community, we risk losing the respect of the public that we serve. So with that as the fundamental premise of why the Diversity Committee was created, we have moved to try to, one, shine a light on the fact that we need to do much more community engagement to explain the work that the court does, and also to encourage those from diverse backgrounds to enter the judicial system. And I'm positive that the students of Victoria are sick of me saying this, but every schools group I talk to, I say to them, there is a place for you in the law. There is a place for everyone. The judicial system that we will build is one which will welcome you and will respect you for who you are. Now, have we achieved any of that, Cami, in the last 8 months?
I don't think we have fully achieved those goals, but I do think that the Diversity Committee is a massive step in the right direction. I think when I was in law school, if someone had come in and told me at the judiciary there's a diversity committee that is dedicated to ensuring that you feel valid in this profession, that you feel empowered to be successful in this profession, I would have felt extremely safe and unafraid of boldly pursuing my dreams. And I think that one of the best things that has come out of this committee is how I heard about this job was Judge Pillay was judging a moot that I did in Monash. And, you know, to hear a judge tell me that I could apply to be an associate was amazing. So hearing Judge Pillay say that he is going to schools and telling students as a part of the committee that there's a place for you is extremely insane to me, because I never heard those things in my first years of law school or in high school at that. So I do think that in a few years, we will accomplish all of the amazing goals the committee has set out. And I think Rabia can add more on that.
Well, could I maybe ask Rabia to touch on perhaps, you know, some of the goals and the plans of the committee and the work?
So I'm part of the subcommittee, so I can definitely talk about that. So I'll explain what the subcommittee is. Achal and Kami are both on that subcommittee. The subcommittee at the moment is predominantly made up of associates. We're a small group of associates who we get together quite often, mostly for lunch, I think. But it's been so far an avenue for us to increase engagement within the court, across the judicial support staff and across the different groups of the county court. It's an avenue for the our court community to raise any ideas they might have or any projects they might want to get involved with. And it's also an avenue for us to provide assistance to the main committee. One of the projects the subcommittee's helped with is the pronunciation of names document, which is a current live document. I would encourage everyone to go and have a look at on the County Court website. As someone with a name that can be difficult for most people to pronounce, it's really important that we have a significance attached to that. So that document was really, I felt very proud when we had that, and I know Chol was involved in that, so maybe she can tell us a little bit more about it.
I was not involved in that. I saw the finished product, which was amazing, and I saw the aftermath of it, of practitioners asking like how to say a certain like ethnically diverse name. My name's very simple, it's 5 letters, but it can trip some people up, and it feels nice when practitioners ask me, how do I pronounce your name? Or how do I say your surname, which is really good. But I think one of the associates that was really instrumental in assisting and who was part of the subcommittee is Ashwin, who's no longer with us, but I know he worked closely with Judge to help produce that document. And I think it's a very important document. It's the right step in the process. And hopefully we'll just continue having more positive changes.
And I will just add that, I've said earlier that I've worked at the court for a number of years, and when I first came here, often people would say my name wrong and I would never correct them, because that's what I've done my whole life. If you say my name wrong, I just go with it, to the point where somebody called me Nadia for 5 years and I just said nothing. But that's on me, and it was on me because I didn't correct them. So for me, having an initiative like this through the Diversity Committee and having this spoken about also empowers me to, when someone says my name wrong, to say, oh, actually, this is how you say it. It was important for me to recognise that I needed to do something, but I needed that little bit of backing. And, this has been such a positive change to now say, oh, actually, no, this is how you say my name, or I prefer to be called this. And it's a wonderful step in the right direction.
Just on that, and to finish it off a little bit, it is such a simple thing. It is such a simple thing, but it carries enormous weight because it's about respect. And if our system's not about respect, then really, what is it about? We are the first state, we are the first court to have this in the country. And when this was presented nationally 2 weeks ago, the rest of the states went, well, that seems like something we should do as well. You kind of wonder why it's taken us so long, yes, but the rest of the country.
Oh, can I add to that? Look, I believe it's good to have a diverse culture that's happening in the court system, but from where I came from and the communities I've been to throughout the country, Alice Springs and Queensland, New South Wales, Western Australia, for us Aboriginal First Nations people, the way we've been treated, we see it different, as you said earlier today, like as a disease, and we do see it. We walk around in fear, because as soon as you say, oh, I'm here as an Aboriginal person and the other side's German, it's like you're being, what's that word? It's like you're being, I can't remember that word now. Judged. You're being judged right away, because after the referendum after 1967, and it's taken us 60-something years, and as I said, it's 2022, and we still feel that fear. The kids, the teenagers, they're scared they're going to die. They're scared they're going to get bashed up by the police. Look, small community, the police will take them out and make them walk back to the hometown. But what I've seen it's just hard for us. We feel like we try, but we give up because we try, and they say, look, we're bludgers. Of course we are, because we tried so much that we just get sick of it. That what else are we supposed to do? I mean, it's good to see all these different cultures come in, but we feel like we're not getting ahead either. It's like, give them a couple of grants, give them a couple of this, and that's it. Like the way I see it in my career growing up and stuff like that, and building houses for the communities and stuff, and yeah, I see it a different way. It'll take a long time to recover of what our culture's been through. But yeah, so I just
So
thought I might bring that up.
What are the steps you think we can take?
Well, that's a really good question, Judge, and I think that's one of the questions from the floor, and I'll start with Werner. because I think that's great. And the question more broadly is, each of the panel members, would they have a suggestion, or what suggestion would they have to make the courts more culturally safe and inclusive for people from culturally, linguistically diverse backgrounds to attend court? So that's a broader question, but if you could maybe answer Judge's question to start with, or that.
It's look, we've gone to the point, like we've been voicing our opinions for years and years. There's 1,000 reports out there about this.
Yeah.
But every time we want to bring it out and try and tell them that we need a cultural structure and all different government department organisations, stuff like that, which they have, but not really supportive. But we just get sick of it. We're sick of telling all the time. We're just, for 60 years, make a change. If you're going to do it, do it. Not talk about it.
There was one change, Werner, in terms of accessing the courts or attending the courts from, a First Nations perspective. What would that be for you?
Oh, well, it's hard to strike that now, but just any change, just something that people can see. So we don't have to walk around in fear and say, look, we can see the change. In the court, like you go to Koori Court, you go there because you're guilty. You know what I mean? Like how many innocent Aboriginal teenagers been to court saying, look, I'm guilty because they're young, they're teenagers, and get sentenced. And again, get pushed away, arm's length. It's been happening for a long time. It's good to have the elders there, but they feel pressure for being there, supporting the teenagers. So it's still
difficult
got
for the elders as well to be there.
it is, it's the pressure. I mean, they're there for support, but what can they do? Because we got two different gaps, like you want to close the gap, and that's good, but there's two different cultures that's always going to be, like we connect in a way that we connect, like you guys connect in your old cultures.
Yeah.
And the English people connect the way they connect. So you can work together, but you always won't have that fully closure of the gap.
When I asked that question, when it wasn't because I asked you that question because I think that's all on you. Because it's not, it's all of our responsibility to try to understand the issue that Indigenous peoples face, and it's for all of us to try to resolve that. So I'm not saying if you don't have the answers, well, then I don't have to do anything.
No. But we just get sick of hearing it all the time. That's all.
So I think that's the first part of having discussions like this about diversity. It's about saying you have to listen, you have to try to understand, and then if you understand that there is a problem, then it's on you to do something about it too. It's not enough to just say, well, Ravi's got a problem because people don't pronounce the name, that's on her. It's the person standing next to her to stand up and say, well, actually, no, that's not okay. Because if you're in this thing together and that thing is about fostering a respectful institution, about building something important for all of us, then we have to stand next to those people who are suffering or not having a fair go. So, and this is not the forum for me to start saying, well, we've got this, and this in train to help that situation that you're facing particularly. But I do say to you that we can't simply be in a situation where we leave it to those people suffering from the injustice or the discrimination to solve for themselves. That is not the community we should try to build. It's not the judicial system we should try to build. So just as I hear the problems you talk about, I also think about the solutions for your problems as much as I can from my.
That'd be good. Yeah.
So just picking up on that, could I maybe direct a question to Camu, please, in relation to the Koori Court? We have a Koori Court in the county court. It's a little bit, obviously a little bit different to the way our mainstream court runs, as it heavily involves the community, which you've alluded to in terms of elders attending to support, the litigants coming to court or those who are being prosecuted. Camu, would you mind explaining a little bit about what the Koori Court is, and then I might speak to Werner a little bit about, how he feels it benefits the community. I know you touched upon this a little bit, Werner, and you may not have, a response to that, but we might come back to you and hear your thoughts about that in a moment.
Yes, so the Curry Court, I think from a legal perspective, is one of the best steps Victoria has taken towards attempting to integrate culture into sentencing. So the Curry Court functions very differently to a formal/Western court setup. So it involves a sentencing conversation, whereas when mentioned, the elders come in and judges don't wear robes and you sit around a table. And the most important thing that comes out of the Curry Court is that the offender or the accused understands the impact of their actions, not only on themselves, but also on the community at large. And it's a very amazing setup because it came out after the Royal Commission inquiry into deaths in custody. And it was one of Victoria's solutions into attempting to integrate culture into the courts. And it was set up with the assistance of Indigenous people, which I think is what really brings home that cultural impact of the Curry Court, is that it wasn't set up separately by, more Western seeming Australians. It involved the elders, it involved the Indigenous communities in Victoria. They were asked, what would you like your court to look like? And that's what we have today at the Curry Court.
And Myrna, you've observed the Curry Court in action. Can you speak to any benefits to the community that you feel?
Yeah, no, it's a good step from the Curry Court. It makes the defender or victim feel more comfortable, feel more cultural, having part of the family there and the elders against the other systems. Yeah, it's working.
It's working.
It's working. Yeah. It's slowly getting
Thank you.
there.
Judge, if I may direct a question to you from the floor. Is there a problem with a lack of diversity regarding judicial roles in terms of magistrates, judges, justices?
Is there a problem currently?
With a lack of diversity, yes, currently.
I think that really goes back to the issue about what sort of system we want to build. We don't collect judicial statistics on judicial, the makeup of every court for screening for diversity statistics or diversity characteristics rather. That would probably allow us to understand what sort of mix we actually have. But really, I think we need to focus on what sort of system we want to build in the future. Atrol, as someone who comes from a different perspective than I do, in that she's starting, and so she probably looks outward a bit more than I do. She might have a particular view on whether we do have a representative bench at all levels. But at the moment, I think we need some statistical analysis of that.
I think we're getting there. I wouldn't say we have a representative bench just yet, because I know when I first started law school in 2018, there wasn't like a brown judge I can see on the bench or a African barrister. Like I knew maybe 2 African solicitors, but that was about it. And the legal profession is big. So I think there's definitely still a long way to go, but we're getting there. And I think it's important to recognize that having more culturally diverse judges, magistrates, even associates, it's really important for young people starting out in the law, because it's good to see someone who looks like you and someone who cares about you in a higher position, because it gives you that motivation, that drive, and that comfort and reassurance that I do belong in this profession, despite the history behind the profession and what it's done to people who look like me. This is a place where I can belong and I can make change in here. So I think, it's really important that we move towards a more culturally diverse bench, and even just associates in general, and even security guards and judicial support officers, just core users in general. I think we need to move to more.
We need to be more reflective of the community that we represent.
Yeah.
In every area of the court and system.
Yeah, and also go out to all the aspects of the community, not just pick a certain law school or a certain university or a certain high school or a certain section of the community. I think we need to branch out and basically just be like what Judge says, you do have a place in this profession and doors can be open for you if this is where you want to end up.
And I can just add there that you do feel like in my experience, having judges who are from diverse backgrounds can, those of us like Achol, Kami and I, where we are in our career, it makes you feel like you do belong, because I know there was a time where I felt like, okay, well, I don't think there's a place for me here. But over time that has changed, and I can firmly say that, okay, well, no, there is a place for me here, and that will continue to grow. And I will have all the support from all the right people, and over time things will, I can see that trickling happening, and nothing changes overnight, but it's difficult when you don't feel like you belong. So just changing that one thing of making someone feel that they belong somewhere, that can have a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think that ties back into perfectly what Werner was saying, how with First Nations people, their history with the police and the court system, it's so corrupted, and they're historically just been like oppressed here. So them coming here, they're not going to feel welcomed, and they're not going to feel belong unless there's a change. And that change leads with conversations and educations with everyone. It's not just on First Nations people. It's not just on culturally diverse people to have those conversations. It needs to happen with everyone.
And not just conversations,
And some
action.
self-education.
Actions, yeah, and self-education.
Self-education is very important.
Pretty good too, yeah.
Thank you. That was fantastic. That was really great. I mean, and actions speak louder than words. And just having a panel here today as part of Law Week with such diversity in the court, and I'm sure there are a few more of us in the court, is amazing. I mean, when I started here 2 years ago, I didn't think I'd ever see someone wearing a hijab, and now there are 3 of us in the court, and that's not to say there aren't more Muslims in the court. And the cultural inclusion and diversity committee hosted a morning tea to celebrate the breaking of fast after Ramadan, to acknowledge Eid, and that was so well attended. We drafted some words about what it means to Muslims to fast, some context, and what it then means to celebrate, and that's partly education, but that's also respect and learning, and that's action, all in what wrapped up in one seemingly small morning tea. But what it means to people like myself, you can't describe the impact that has for us about being included and understood and respected, and people making an effort to learn about who we are. And I'm not a young person, and it's taken over 40 years for me to feel that respect and that acknowledgement, and people taking the time out to show that they care about who I am and what my personal life is and what that means to me and what I can bring to the legal profession. So it's fantastic. Could I maybe ask another question from the floor, please? It's a big question. So the question is, there are those who think that merit and diversity are mutually exclusive. Do you agree that diversity doesn't disregard merit, but rather acknowledges that any points of diversity do not hinder a person's employment and a sense of inclusion in an organisation?
I take it you're looking at me.
No, anybody who would like to answer that question?
I can attempt to answer it.
Thank you,
So
Tammy.
I moved to Australia when I was 18 years old to study law, and I moved from a third world country, and I went to Monash, which is regarded as a pretty good institution. I would be surprised if somebody looked at me and thought that I only got this job because of affirmative action or anything of the sort. I think that everyone sitting here has done their fair share of work, has the grades. Like, if you decided that you wanted to do an in-depth human resources search and pull out of all of our transcripts, you would see that we do have the grades. The problem comes in when you've done the work, you have the grades, but nobody wants to give you an opportunity. You've worked hard, you've immigrated, you have the grades, you went to the right schools, you sound how people want you to sound, but nobody wants to take a look at you. No one wants to consider how hard you've worked and what you can do. So I do think that merit and diversity do coincide. I just don't think at times that merit is taken into account. I think you're just overlooked because you look a certain way, even though you do have all the credentials, which is something that I experienced, because when I was finishing university, they weren't considering people from other countries for clerkships or for grad jobs. And I had the grades, I had everything set out right in front of me, but no one was going to give me a chance. So yeah, I do think
And
that.
I think that leads to sometimes self-doubt, because I remember I was invited to be on a board at a local community organisation that houses a community legal centre. And I turned around and said to that person, oh, I'm always a token Muslim person. That person turned around and said to me, no, Randa, it's actually because you've got merit and we would like you to be on the board. And that is, if I ever think that again, I stop myself from thinking that. And that's on me, not on them. And I need to believe in myself. And that actually, I'm there, I was asked because of the merit, but also what else I can bring that is different, but valuable.
But I think also going back to what Cami was saying, the other problem is also once you do make it through the door, you're then judged and people think that you are a diversity hire and you're only hire because of your background. So not only do you first have to deal with people not taking you seriously or accepting you, even though you do have the grades and the merit, you then also have to deal with people thinking that you only got here because the institution they're in wanted to tick a diversity box. So I think that's why change needs to happen in regards to just education and action. But I was also going to throw it to Judge and ask him, when you're hiring associates, what do you look for?
Well, what questions did I ask you for your interview?
Well, I don't think we really had an interview. I think you asked me about what books I read and who was my role models.
Yes.
I think that's what I remember. I think I was maybe a bit too nervous as well.
Well, this is just an insight into my hiring practices, but every interview is different. So
Yes.
for you, I think we stood under an umbrella and we talked about books.
Yeah.
With Webster, we walked around the park and we talked about, work-life balance. Merit comes in many different forms. And when we reduce it to simple grades issued by one university, then we look at an extraordinarily narrow band of what constitutes merit. That is old thinking. We need to adapt to the modern world. People bring so many experiences that we need to value properly. So I value the experience of being a migrant. I know what it's like to get on a plane with 3 suitcases and move countries. I know what it's like not to have anyone around you. So I value that. You come through that experience, you go to an Australian university with no support and you achieve even a modest grade. What am I meant to do? Am I meant to say, well, that grade's going to count a lot more in my estimation than what you've gone through to get there? I don't know. But ultimately, I judge the person. I judge the whole person. And can they talk to me? Can they get to the fundamentals of what it is to be a human? Is it about, do they value fairness? Do they respect people? Do they believe in the value of changing our community for good? Those are the things that go to comprise merit. It's not a GPA score.
But sorry, can I, we've got 1 minute left to go. I just want to let the people that are watching know that I'm so sorry. There have been some fantastic questions that have come through. Unfortunately, we're going to run out of time and not be able to address all of those questions. But there is one question, Rabia, once you've added what you've added, that I will then ask, because I think it allows each one of you to really nicely sum up.
All I was going to add was that, just from what Judge said about merit is not just about grades, but also having a good resume and having a good cover letter, that in itself is a privilege. Having someone look over that for you and give you feedback, and that's not accessible to everyone. So it's, or also, having your school on your resume or having all these, and, I know there are some organisations that now practice blind resumes. If I don't see your references and what school you went to and all of those things, I don't have the chance of unconscious bias. So we need to perhaps start looking towards, okay, well, if we're going to say, okay, we don't want to have this conversation about, are these two things mutually exclusive? Because the reality is they are, they do overlap. I've definitely had the experience that a child's had of, being questioned as to whether I was hired because of being a diversity quota hire. But I know now that I deserve, and I can do my job and I deserve to be here. But I do wonder whether in the future, how we can combat this kind of thing, people having that feeling. So we because ultimately there is unconscious bias and there are certain privileges that certain parts of our society have in terms of applying for jobs or things like that. So yeah, so that's all I was going to add there.
Thank you. That's actually a really important point, and it's, you know, again, name, address, addresses are now
Where
being
you
removed,
live,
where
yeah.
you live, all those sorts of things. So it's really critical for an equal playing field or a level playing field, or at least to begin, from it. Now, I know we've got, we're meant to go to one last question. We've only got 10 minutes, but what I'd like to do is go to one last question from the floor and give you all about 30 seconds, or whoever would like to speak for about 30 seconds or a minute. What motivates or inspires you to continue to pursue a career in the law? Could I please start with you, Werner?
Just my experience, you never give up. You keep going. You hit the walls. You know you got to hit a wall, but you just keep going. Just don't matter what people say. Just do it. You know, you live once, and
Good advice.
just keep going. That's what I've learned.
I think mine is my belief that change happens within, not outside. So I think being within the legal profession, there is a lot of change that I can make or other people can make to help our community feel better and interact with the legal system a bit more better. And also, I don't mind making me feel uncomfortable. So I don't mind being in a room and then someone saying, oh, okay, you shouldn't be here. And I'm like, no, actually I do. And let's talk. So don't mind that.
For me, it's I've had the wonderful privilege of this job, and I used to complain about a lot of these things to when I came here to the judge I worked for, and she would say to me, well, what do you want to do about it? How are we going to address this? And it was really having her push me and make me think about things, and give me the confidence to go and say to people, oh, what do you mean by that? And let me tell you a little bit about me, and just trying to help slowly change mindsets, because that's the only way we're going to move forward. And we can't all avoid a profession or industry because we're not going to fit in. We have to just keep going and only give things the amount of air and time they need. And just keep going, and it motivates me to see so many more people who are willing to have these conversations, and that's a really positive thing for me to have that, and having more people who are willing to support me and say, oh well, that's not a good experience, so and what can we do about it, and they're aware of that in future.
And I think Her Honour had given you some good advice. It's sometimes there are problems, we recognise there are problems, but sometimes we know there are people that are willing to champion us. So perhaps we need to look at some of the solutions and put those solutions to those people so that we have a chance at implementing those as well. So
yeah,
she was
probably sick of me complaining to her about it as well.
No, I had a boss that would say that. Should you come into the problem, Randa? What's the solution? It's really critical to also think about how we can be part of that change process which you touched on. Do you mind if I just go to the final question, please, because I'm conscious of time? If I could start perhaps with you, Your Honour.
Well, we've got Cami who's next in line.
Well, either way, I'm happy for you to knowing what you know now, the hurdles that you may have had to jump, not may, I know that you've had to go through hurdles, and the experiences that you've accumulated. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, and I know some of you are very young, what would that advice be? Even going back 6, 12, 24 months, we can all reflect on that and think, what advice would I give myself looking back?
To my younger self who got on the plane at 18 with her 3 suitcases by herself, I would say fear is definitely part of the process, but your strength will lie in overcoming that fear and understanding that being different, sticking out is part of what's going to make you special and important in this profession. You have such a global mindset, and that's not something that you can teach. It's something that's learned by not living in a country where you work. And so that's what I'll tell my younger self, just get over the fear and everything will settle in.
Judge?
That was pretty powerful. I took a lot from that. I would say to my younger self, who was consumed by anger and let that anger turn into a lot of hatred, don't do that. Don't do that. Use your anger for good, and always remember there's a place in your heart for someone else. There'll always be friends to support you. Don't think that you're alone. And if I listened to that advice when I was perhaps 24, the next 10 years would have been a lot easier.
Is there anyone who has a burning desire to answer that question, or are you comfortable? Please.
I would tell my younger self who stormed into a prominent criminal justice chambers and asked for a job, to believe in yourself and find your people. Find people who are going to support you, who are going to be not only sympathetic, but empathetic to the experiences that you're going to go through, because there's quite a few that you will, and still quite very young, so haven't gone through a lot of them yet, but just find people who are going to be there to back you and you can talk to comfortably.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm getting the wind up for time, so if I may just leave it there. And if I could just finish by thanking all of our wonderful panelists, Werner, Achol, Rabia, Cami, and His Honour Judge Pillay. We're sorry that Her Honour Judge Tran wasn't able to be here, but she's done some fantastic work in this area, and I'd like to just acknowledge and recognise all of her work throughout her years at the court. Thank you to all of you who attended today, and thank you for asking such interesting questions, and I apologise that there were so many questions that we weren't able to address them all. If you know someone who couldn't make it today, we will be publishing these recordings and the recordings of all of our events from Law Week on our website. And at the end of this session, there will be a very short survey that will pop up. If you do have the time, we'd really appreciate if you are able to give us some of your feedback and to complete it. That concludes our event for today. Thank you again for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you.